Right. I think hopefully everybody's got food settled down. So let's do a quickie for the next 15 minutes on the topic from an idea to a working prototype. So very quickly, I'm going to do a very quick introduction about myself, and then we'll just jump into the topic. So I'm Kaushik. I'm primarily a Java developer. I work in a company called BlackRock, which is the world's largest asset management company or money manager. And we also do something called Aladdin, which is essentially a software as a service. And also, a random fact about myself, I really like attending hackathons, which I think is one of the backdrops to this quick talk that I'm giving. Which is something that I actually end up doing in hackathons when I go there to talk about it. So if people haven't been to hackathons, one of the things that happens is you get 36 hours where you want to start off with some idea that probably you or someone else from the audience has come up with, and then go ahead and have something working, some kind of a working prototype in front of you. And that can be challenging. And you can use the same principle that I'm referring to in hackathons to also things that we have to do in our day-to-day job. So what am I going to talk about for the next 15 minutes or so? So these are the buckets, the 5 buckets that I want to concentrate on. So this is where I'm thinking, right, I've got an idea, and I want to take this idea and go ahead and reach some level of execution with some level of thought process behind it. So doing some kind of refinement, sketching, of course, the development part of it. How do you then think about scaling it, and then the execution part? And then if I'm mentioning specifically the hackathons bit, maybe that's where the scaling bit can be put in a nice box and kept aside. There are lots of boxes inside this that I want to concentrate on, and we have about 13 minutes now, and I have about 13 slides, each explaining some of these things. So I'm going to be very quick and throwing some ideas out there for people to start using. Right, so first step, you have an idea, great. You've probably just started working on redefining it, trying to get people in the team to help build this. But I think it's important to be able to build the idea. So it's about how do you take your thought process that you have to something where you feel very proud of yourself. And to do this, I'm actually going to take a very simple example. I'm going to take an idea, a very simple idea, and use you as my potential stakeholders and walk you through the process of creating a simple prototype. Maybe not the whole way, but at least as and when possible in this talk. So that's my idea, which, let's say, I want to build. I want to create an app where users can create personal portfolios and set trigger points to get notifications. Each portfolio will consist of multiple company stocks. Right, so very quick explanation of what I want to do. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to use some takeaway tips for each of these steps that I'm referring to, and something that I've learned over time. If you want, you can use it. If not, well, that's OK as well. So some takeaway tips while you're defining the idea. People can go on and on and on with what they want to build, and it can be very difficult. So I think the key point I would say is, at the most, use 3 sentences to define what you really want to build. And I think the key point is, when you have a massive set of idea that you want to do, start trying to take things out, the whole MVP model. How do you start removing things and stop only when there's nothing more else that you're ready to take away? That's when you've been able to define your idea to the simplest possible level. So step 2, it's about thinking about user stories. And it's about defining what you want. So some of you might be using something similar like that, or maybe just using a pen and paper to write this down. But using some kind of a way of defining those 3 things. As a blank, I want blank so that blank. And you fill that up. So again, taking that portfolio example that I was talking about, as a user, I want to create a portfolio so that I can track my company stocks. So a very simplified explanation so that I can use that as a way of defining what is it that I'm trying to create. Some takeaways for this. Draw user journeys. At times, it helps a lot to draw some kind of quick user journeys to see where you want to reach, because at times it's not very clear. Maybe it's clear for you, not for someone who you're working with. Talk to your potential users, because maybe you're thinking about lots of different clicks and the users are not really keen about that. And don't try to spend too much time trying to use fancy tools to draw user journeys and user stories. Just stick to the basics. Pen and paper, that should get you through. There is a time to start using some particular softwares, and we'll touch upon them next. Right, so once you're done that, talking about wireframing. And I think inherently, wireframing was not natural for me. I thought let's just build something quickly. And then I started doing some Googling about seeing bad designs. And I came across this really cool website, which is, I don't know how to say it, but agnet.net. And if you are one of the persons who's actually gone ahead and created it, I'm sorry, but that's really, really difficult to navigate. So creating wireframes actually helps you understand how is it going to be for some of your users to go and use your product. So I'm not a designer myself by choice, but I decided to at least try things out. So couple of really quick mock-ups for the portfolio example that I was talking about. So a couple of screens, you see some options, and then the second thing, you're looking at one of your portfolio, you can select some of your company stocks and start adding them. Some takeaway tips for this is try to make it really simple when you're doing this. The whole principle that the Apples and the Googles and the Microsoft use when you're trying to design things. And there are some really nice free wireframing tools that you can use to start doing some of these. These things that I've drawn over here are drawn in draw.io, very quick to create. It helps you create a picture, export it, and just move on from there. Right, so you've gone ahead and created some wireframes. You know roughly what you're trying to do. Next step is to create some UI mockups. And UI mockups, one of the things that you need to worry about is different dimensions, different look and feel based on what device you're using. And again, a very simple example that I did was decided to create some of the mockups based on the wireframes I had created earlier and just see how things are going. So I can select the security, I can say edit portfolio, you get the idea. How do I do that? Some takeaway tips for that is there are two tools which I really, really like. One is InVision app, and the other is Marvel app. You can go ahead and use that as a way of really creating it. And really, the first 4 points, you've not really gone ahead and done any coding. But at least by the end of this, and especially if you're using things like InVision app and Marvel app, you've created some kind of a look and feel prototype that you can then start sending to some of your friendlier users to see, what do you think if I created an application like that? And then you get some level of thought process coming out from this conversation. So at this point, you have probably got a good understanding of what is it that you want to build ahead. So let's go on and start talking about the development aspect of things then. And that's firstly probably starting with front-end design. And I think one of the key things that when you start doing front-end is you need to start thinking about what are the kind of devices that you want to support. Do you want to play it safe and start with thinking of everything, or do you want to start with maybe just the desktop, maybe just the web version, maybe the mobile version? Or do you want to even think about some wearable technologies? And then if you are doing this as a prototype, as a quick proof of concept for someone to see, do you want to quickly go for a hybrid? Now, there are some takeaway tips that I'm going to mention that help you do some of these things very quickly. Probably you have used some of them. So you have PhoneGap, and there are a couple of others as well that you can use to build quick hybrid apps. There are plenty of website builders. So WordPress obviously is one of the easier ones to go ahead and start using it. You also have some language-specific platforms that you can use to do cross-platform. So Xamarin is one of them. I think Waden, they're one of the stalls out there, also do something similar. So if you want to stick to Java, you can use Waden. And in no way am I saying that's the way you should do it for the final production version of it, but it at least helps you build something up quickly to see what's happening across multiple devices. Right, moving on. So backend. You've got a functional front end. People are using it, but of course you need some kind of a service on the back to help you out. So some things to start considering about over there is what kind of servers you're talking about. If you're talking about your servers being web-based, so what kind of REST protocols you're using. So essentially the communication. How are you dealing with push notifications? What kind of message bus you're using to help communicate with your backend if that's what you want to do. Once you start thinking about data, are you thinking just having one massive box where you're going to put everything in? Or are you going to start thinking about database sharding? Are you going to then shard your data in a way that you can do quick lookup? Or do you want to then start thinking about different options where you want to go ahead and start using things like, obviously, the SQL solutions, but also some of the NoSQL solutions. So do you want to go ahead and start using things like Cassandra to put your data in? Some quick takeaways for that is, okay, and I think the first one is something that I really enjoy using when I want to quickly set up something. And it's something called as Firebase, which in Google I/O they actually announced that Google has taken over, so now it's firebase.google.com. But it essentially is a very quick way of just pushing your JSON objects in it, and then being able to retrieve it real time as and when required. So very quick way of actually having something up and running when you want to do quick prototyping. There are some starter kits that people have put together. I've gone ahead and forked one of them, and that's the link where you can go ahead and start using it. It gives you all the bare essentials you would probably need when you're trying to set something up from a backend perspective. Moving on to Elasticity, and I think this is what I was mentioning about, where you stop thinking from a hackathon perspective, but then you obviously want to think about it when you're trying to build your systems properly. And that's where you've now trying to move away from that one box that you were running everything to maybe a public cloud, maybe a private cloud, or even a hybrid based on what kind of solution you're looking for. Also, maybe you want to start thinking about the old way of doing it via virtual machines, or even containers. Some really nice talks in DevOps where we were talking about different containers, about how you can use that as a way of solving some of these problems. I think one of the things that I really like when I'm doing quick prototyping is a lot of cloud providers nowadays have a trial version that I can use as a way of quickly spinning something up. So do the whole try before buy policy, where you try things out, see how things are looking, and then if you think that's a good solution, obviously, then you go ahead and start using it. Also, when I'm doing things for my personal projects, I end up using Heroku a lot. It's a very quick way of just pushing whatever you have as a past solution and seeing what kind of responses you're getting. Right, we have 2 minutes, and we have a couple of points to go on. So, monitoring and reporting. I think once you have something up and running, you're happy with how it's performing, it's also good to have a feedback loop of seeing what kind of responses you're getting back. So looking at different app performances, being able to use logs as a way of triggering what kind of changes you probably want to look at. Looking at network traffic and seeing if you've handled load balancing in a more efficient way as required. And then if you are running your own hardware solution, looking at things like disk space analysis, and definitely from a security perspective, have you done all the SSL required and other security checks required. Some quick takeaways for that is there's some really good logging frameworks. So I think ELK is one of the sponsors out again. They help you get an ELK stack which you can use. There's also things like App Dynamics or Splunk that you can use as a way of just pushing all your log data in and then using that as a way of seeing what exactly is happening with regards to performance of your systems. Right, and then finally, it's about, at the end, the execution bit, which is where you're trying to have a agile-friendly environment. And yes, the term agile is misused quite a lot, but in this context, I'm talking about being able to collaborate with the team members that you're using to do this prototyping, having some level of automation to help run this properly, doing lots of releases, trying to have release cycles about, 2 weeks or something. having some level of self-organization where you've created this structure and people know this is how you want to go ahead and start building it. And then being able to have that level of autonomousity to be able to experiment with some of these ideas. And there are a couple of really nice takeaways for that. There's a really good Agile course that I took on Coursera, which I really enjoyed. So definitely recommend that. And I think probably you've already looked at the Agile Manifesto, which obviously gives you some pointers around that. So that's essentially it. That's the quick summary. So you have an idea, you go through with the refinement, sketch it out, develop it, scale it, and then be able to execute it. There's a blog post I'd written about it, so if you want, go ahead and you can read more about it. But if there are any questions, I'm up for it. But thank you so much.